on an international platform at a conference, I remember opening my address by saying, I have a dream. And that dream was to establish and help to grow a gerontology in Africa, and certainly in South Africa. And that is what's happened. Research on aging in South Africa has definitely come of age, and growingly so also in other African countries, in sub-Saharan Africa.
Professor Monica Ferreira is the most prominent first-generation exponent of research and development of policy on aging in Africa.
How did you get into the whole field of aging research?
It's a funny thing. I was studying sociology, and in our honours there was a textbook, and it focused on, it denigrated all these particular groups like prostitution and divorce and illegitimacy and drugs and gangsterism and whatnot. And older people were included, with older persons. And this I kicked against, and I remember kicking against the head of the department, who was the author. And we had quite a fight in those days, so I thought, okay, when I've finished that, I will do a master's on this exact topic. And that's what I did. So I guess that's how I got into it.
She not only pioneered the field in Africa, but also contributed internationally to the expansion of research on population aging as one of the major challenges that will face the globe in the 21st century.
Then you ended up at the Human Science Research Council, and that was a hugely important phase of the development of gerontology in South Africa.
Fortunately, when I was appointed there, I was able to focus on aging because they knew of my interest, and they already had an aging program. But it was limited research, and it was looking at exactly these things, yes, no answers to, and trying to assess their circumstances or their social conditions, as it was called. And it didn't go any further than that. But then the HSRC in its wisdom started the South African National Program, Cooperative Program on Aging. And there I got to put together a committee. The HSRC gave me a lot of opportunities. I got to travel. I remember I went to the States to study what they were doing on aging, because in those days there were academic sanctions. We couldn't access textbooks, we couldn't correspond with scholars overseas, we were on our own. Even in African countries, we couldn't connect with them. We had very little knowledge of what was going on in Africa. But then that was a decade, and then I broke away with the HSRC support, to start the Centre for Gerontology at University of Cape Town. I think the first project we did was the multidimensional survey of older persons, and that was in the 4 ethnic groups as they were defined in those days. And we generated a massive database which we could mine over and over, and we were able to identify and pinpoint problems that each of the population groups were experiencing within socioeconomic context, and that just gave us so much knowledge to pursue new directions and take it further. And I was able to do pretty much what I wanted and take things in new directions. At the time, it was also possible to reach into, this was the 90s, to start to reach into other African countries, and they were equally interested because they weren't allowed to previously have contact with us. And so I began to build contacts in all of these countries. The other thing during those years is that I started the Southern African Journal for Gerontology. And that was an important vehicle because, first of all, there was no journal in Africa on gerontology. Secondly, African countries, their libraries at the universities couldn't afford to buy the overseas journals. So there was this dearth of literature, although literature couldn't be accessed. So this was important. And it gave scholars a medium to write papers on their research and have them published.
It gave African gerontology in Africa, or aging research in Africa, a voice.
At last.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we were able then to take even further steps and move further abroad into the States, into Europe, and particularly into Southeast Asia, where so much of the aging conditions there are very similar to what they are in Africa.
On the foundation that Professor Ferreira laid over 2 decades, the United Nations endorsed African Research on Aging Network was established in 2005 at the University of Oxford.
In the argument that I want to present to you this evening, I build and I stand on the shoulders of two real giants who were the pioneers of research on aging in Africa about 40 years ago. I speak, of course, of Professor Nana Abt, who worked at the University of Ghana, and Professor Monica Ferreira, who is at the University of Cape Town, where she founded and for many years led the Institute of Aging in Africa.
I was working with the South African government, who was reluctant to listen to any research knowledge, research findings. They felt their programs were sufficient as it was. So it was a long road that needed to be travelled, and it was a slippery slope, unfortunately. But I think gradually policy was shaped accordingly. Another important event was the United Nations Plan of Action on Aging, or known as the Madrid Plan, MIPA. And I was fortunate to be, and so was Nana, to be on the technical committee to draft that plan. And we would meet all over the world to do this work. And when the draft plan came out, governments were exhorted to support it, to follow it, and our South African government did indeed sign up and became a party of it.
To this day, research endeavours in Africa is still guided and coordinated by networks established by Professor Ferreira.
She's really good at connecting different individuals who have different interests but share so much in common.
I started realizing that unless we bring research into practice, no one will take us seriously. And it's been an uphill battle. I mean, we deal with two very different worlds, the world of what I call the trenches and the academic world.
I first met Monica at the Institute of Aging at Groote Hospital in Cape Town, and it was a chance meeting that left me speechless. She is such a force.
And I still tease Monica about the first time I walked into her office saying to her, I'm interested, and she put the fear of God into me. Her research to me read like a beautiful novel.
In the early years, she sort of supported me in my writings. You know how clinical trainees are in short writing, and so as a social scientist, she really improved me.
And as a woman wanting to get into gerontology studies, to have a role model like Monica has really been inspiring. And as my career has progressed, she's been a fantastic mentor.
Certainly the work that Monica has done has opened my eyes to the impact of research on the direct care level. It's just a wonderful, wonderful journey towards bringing research into practice.
Now I'm encouraged to see the number of scholars or travellers, shall we say, that are travelling along that road now. These scholars that are committed to not only their studies on aging, but a career in aging, and publishing in aging, and influencing policy and getting involved in practice in their jobs. And that is so encouraging in this country.
In May of 2019, the Northwest University conferred an honorary doctorate on Professor Monica Ferreira in recognition of her lifetime of dedication to the advancement of research and policy development into aging.
I hereby confer the degree Philosophiae Doctor honoris causa upon Professor Monica Ferreira.
The Northwest University and Obtentia is the first institution in Africa to formally recognize the field of research on aging in this manner.
We are really thrilled about the honorary degree bestowed on Monica. Please accept our heartfelt congratulations. And she's been ours, and we give her to you. She's very valuable, and I'm so glad on behalf of the entire ILC Global Alliance that you're honoring her.
Your program at Northwest University is to be congratulated, because you have bridged this interdisciplinary or this multidisciplinary problem that existed, a hiatus, and you've just overcome that and are rearing ahead with that. Research on aging in South Africa has definitely come of age, and growingly so also in other African countries, in sub-Saharan Africa. It's become innovative. It's not using the long, tired perspectives and so on and repeating those questionnaire items. It's identifying new problems and new ways of looking at it. You know, you are taking African gerontology in new directions. I could help to take it up to a certain point, but you stepping further than that. For instance, we live in a new era now of artificial intelligence, of technology, and this is where the future of aging is going to need to be, in technology.